guys, it's Benedictine's the truth. If there's something that I love doing more than anything is actually having deep conversations with people who think like me. Even if they don't necessarily agree with everything that I say, but if I see that this person is a deep thinker, like I will really, really enjoy the conversation. So a couple of weeks ago, I started communicating with this guy. His name is Nathaniel from UK. We've been communicating ever since, and he sent me the link to his YouTube channel, and I started watching his videos, and I was like, damn, like this guy is really onto something, and we started communicating, more and more, and I realized that it would be great actually if we can go live together because I think um, his perspective on reality is actually interesting. How are you, man, Nathaniel? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good, man. I'm happy to be on your live, and yeah, man. I'm looking forward to diving deep on these topics. Yeah, man. Having a good conversation on these. Yeah, man. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward.
I'll definitely post the link to your YouTube channel, but you can tell the viewers the name of your YouTube channel. Yeah, you can tell them what you talk about before we go, deep on what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, yeah. So the name of my channel is Peaks and Valleys. I just made it recently this year, just a few months ago, and essentially the whole core of the channel is just speaking about truth. So it's very similar to Benedictine. Um,
Mm,
the first few videos that I uploaded, I wasn't even sure if I was gonna upload it. There was just one day I was just thinking to myself, and I just recorded a video, the
mm,
absolute and relative truth. So we can get into that later. Um,
mm,
and just kind of watching it myself. I didn't know if I was gonna upload it or not, but I was watching it to myself, and I just thought, like, it's a valuable video. Like, I had an inclination. I felt like I needed to share it. It was just kind of a feeling to share. So I ended up uploading
mm,
the video, but then I was watching it back, and I saw there was a few things that I needed to kind of cover and go deeper on for the viewer to understand. So
mm,
making a part two and part three of that. So my first three videos is just that, those three videos, and from there I kind of just took the core of this absolute truth viewpoint essentially, and I started
mm,
exploring other topics, and I kind of just started going from there. And yeah, and of course I saw your channel a few months ago, and I started watching videos, and I
mm.
liking the perspectives that you were speaking about. So yeah, I just felt I should reach out to you and reach out to as many conscious people as there are, and we can speak about these things, because it's very difficult to find people who think the same way
Yeah.
and have these kind of topics. And I'm sure you've experienced as well that in sometimes in personal life you can't really speak with everyone around you about these things. So I feel like a lot of people
Mm,
are also conscious. They want to speak with other people and communicate about these things. So yeah.
No, that's 100% true, man. Every time when I have a conversation with a person who's actually conscious, I don't know, like I feel like I forget about my problems. I forget about, the problems that I deal with as a human. It almost feels like I don't know, it almost feels like I'm having a psychedelic experience because I'm learning a lot from them. And that's what really like I yearn for. It's like to have like real conversations with people, to understand what is reality because we are having an experience here, you know what I mean? Like we can't just walk around pretending as if we get it, we don't. So
Yeah.
isn't it good that sometimes we have these deep conversations and try to figure out if we can learn something from one another as people because of course I cannot say I've experienced life from everyone's perspective. I've only experienced life from my perspective.
Yeah.
So you've experienced life from your own perspective, so that means that there is something that I can learn from you, and also you have your own perspective. Like it's not just about experience; it's also about how you think as a person.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy having these deep conversations. And
Yeah.
what's interesting, about this conversation that we're about to have is that this is like our first time actually talking. I mean, we used to communicate by just like sending each other text, but this is like our first time actually communicating. So, and I
Yeah.
wanted it to be this way, so
Mhm.
that we are as free as possible. I don't want to I don't want you to feel like, okay, I can't say this, I can't say that. I want you to be 100% free, to be 100% yourself, man.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think is reality? What do you think? There's so much suffering in this room because obviously there is. I don't care what anyone says. Like
Yeah.
what we're going through as sentient beings isn't right. It's unjustifiable. I genuinely can't justify this. What do you think it is, man?
Well, essentially, and this is kind of what I was covering in my first few videos. I see it from the core. Essentially, it is just truth. So it's going to be, I have to explain this. It's going to be a bit tricky because it's very simple, but then the ramifications and the consequences can be very complex. But on the ground
Mm,
level, essentially, there is just absolute truth. So when I say
mm,
absolute, so I have to make a distinction between absolute and relative truth. When I say absolute
mm,
truth, I'm essentially saying a truth that is true at all times under any.
mm,
So it's not based on any conditions. It's not like a relative truth to where, for example, we might say the sky is blue if it's during the daytime. See, that's based on certain
mm,
conditional truth. But the absolute truth, which I'm saying is the core, this is the truth that essentially the most fundamental. It's the most fundamental
mm,
layer, right? And because it's absolute, that what that means is that there is no opposite to this truth. So there's not,
mm,
it's not, for example, when we're speaking about relative truth or conditional truths, then in certain conditions, a thing that we might say is a fact, for example, the sun exists or earth exists or whatever kind of statement we want to make, these things may be true
mm,
at a particular time under certain conditions, but there can be certain conditions where it will no longer be true. So it's
mm,
partially, it's not absolutely true. Um, but this absolute truth, there is no opposite to it because it's absolute. And this is where one of my recent videos, which actually got the most views on my channel, I'd like to ask you about as well, is the video where I said that it's actually impossible for you to think that you are wrong. And this might sound strange,
mm,
but essentially,
mm,
um, the premise of the video is that even when you believe you are wrong, you have to first
mm,
that you are right, that you are wrong.
mm,
So
mm,
essentially, at the absolute level, when I'm saying absolute truth, I'm just saying that the truth is true. All
mm,
it is that it is itself. But why the mind can't grasp this, or why the mind struggles to grasp this, is because it's a causal. So nothing made the truth true because it was always true, and there's no opposite to that.
mm.
So it's
Yeah,
very.
yeah.
I need to explain it deeper. Because essentially, it might people might agree with me. Okay, the truth is true, but then they might think, okay,
Mm,
but what made it true, or how can I put it? Or yes, it's true, but it could not be true. But at the most
mm,
fundamental level, what I would say is that this truth, it can never not be
mm,
true. That because it just is itself. And at the absolute level,
mm,
take the concept of falsehood, something that's false,
mm,
right? Then
mm,
something falsehood cannot exist at the absolute level because falsehood itself is false. So when at the absolute
mm,
everything is itself, right? Falsehood negates itself. So this is it's
mm,
tricky to understand, but a simple analogy that I like to use, for example, mathematics. If you have a plus and a
mm,
plus, then it equals to a plus, right? A positive and a positive is a positive. But if you have a
mm,
minus, a negative, and a minus, it comes out to
mm,
positive. See, it doesn't come out to negative again because two two negatives negate themselves and it comes to a positive. Do you understand what I'm
mm,
saying? So essentially what
mm,
at the absolute level, the truth is true causally. Nothing made it true, and it could never not be true. That's the only thing that really is absolute truth. So this is the core. Like what we would refer to as consciousness. I would essentially say that consciousness is the way this absolute truth appears. That's essentially what I was, the way this absolute truth appears. But the way it appears and manifests in in these realms that we live in, I refer to this as the dualistic or the relative plane. So this is where the absolute truth, in a sense, is split itself into duality, and everything we experience is through these opposites, like up and down, left and right, right and wrong, true and false. So all of these things are relative dualistic splits, and life oscillates these between all of these dualities. There's infinite dualities, any kind of dualities, order, chaos, anything you could think of. Essentially, what we're experiencing is like an oscillation between all of these dualities. So the only way that we can experience life is on this dualistic plane. I would go as far as to argue that from the absolute level, it's not even possible for consciousness. There is consciousnness, but there is nothing to be conscious of at that point, because there hasn't been anything that's split. Like the absolute is, in a sense, is the core that the dualities are being split from. So when there's no divisions, there's nothing to be conscious of, because anything that exists, like for example, if we say this pen exists, then we're saying in the sense that it stands out from the rest of the field. So you could think of the absolute truth as a whole uniform field, right? And every single thing that we say exists, like for example, we say I exist and you exist. These are like these are created through divisions and boundaries that separate us from the rest of the uniform field, right? So I know I'm going, but
No,
oh
keep
yeah,
going. Like, it's interesting.
yeah. So essentially, all there is just the absolute truth, but we can only experience life on this dualistic and relative plane. And because that is the case, because we can only experience things in contrast, from my worldview, or the way I see things, we can only experience things within this dualities, and that's why I would say it's possible to experience any kind of life or any experience without these contrasts of pain and pleasure or life and death. This is why all of these oscillations occur, and that's why I would even go so far as to say that it's impossible to create any kind of creation where suffering is not part of the equation, essentially. So I'm not sure what part you would want to reply to, but yeah, anything.
Okay.
And
Okay. So what we agree on is that consciousness is fundamental, right?
yeah,
And you're saying that, yeah, at an absolute level, consciousness is fundamental, but then it split itself where into like a reality where there's dualities, right?
yes,
So
yeah,
it's yeah, it is like at an absolute level, there is no duality. It's just consciousness. But
yeah,
then to experience reality, it had to split itself into, it had to kind of like make partitions of itself and experience things in a dualistic way so that it can have an experience, so that the reality can exist. And you are saying that it is impossible for reality to exist if there is no duality, right?
yeah,
Meaning that if there was no suffering,
yes,
reality would not exist. If there was no darkness, there wouldn't be light. If there was no blue, there would, I don't even know what the opposite of blue is, but
yeah,
uh okay, you, you know what my problem is? My problem is that um for reality to exist at all, let's say like for reality to just start existing,
yes,
there there had to be something that didn't have an opposite at first, right? You cannot say this reality was manifested uh, and there was duality, right? Like, what was the first thing that consciousness was aware of? Like, was consciousness first aware of suffering at first, or was it aware of like pleasure at first? Did consciousness suffer and then experience pleasure at the same time? Like, if we want to talk about duality, that okay, in order for there to be pain, there must be. I mean, in order for there to be pleasure, there must be pain. So, what would you say consciousness experienced first, right?
Well,
Like when
I, I would
okay,
say,
yeah.
sorry, I would say it's difficult because how can I put this? Obviously, the way we experience life as humans is through time, right? On a linear scale sense. So we tend to
Mm,
think always in like a linear time frame, right? Whereas
mm,
these a lot of the times where we're kind of trying to explain these things, it's almost like anthropomorphizing what happened because these
mm,
things, in a sense, happened outside of time. There wasn't really a particular um, like linear fashion that these events, in a sense, occurred, and
mm,
almost like it didn't really occur. See, when how can I put it? From my viewpoint, existence never really got created. There was never actually a
mm,
point in time where it got created, right? It's just that
mm,
right now, like we're still right now, we're in the absolute. Essentially, the absolute, the truth is just being true. That's essentially what's happening right now. The truth is just being true. It's just that
mm,
it's not true in any particular way. So it the
mm,
only thing I can say about the absolute truth is that it's true, but it's not particular in any way. So it's not true, for example, because when people usually use the word truth, they're using it almost as a description because they only understand truth in the context of the dualistic and relative plane because everything we experience in life is within this plane essentially. So we will say, for example,
mm,
oh, is it true that that thing is big, or is it true that that thing exists, or it doesn't exist? They're kind of using it as a description.
mm,
Truth, essentially, what I'm saying here, it's not really being used to describe something other than itself. It's only being used to describe itself, right? Um,
mm,
and how can I put it? It's only it only it only appears as if the dualistic or relative plane exists. That's why it's always an appearance, or they say it's in a
mm,
sense illusion because it can't really exist. Existence can't really exist. It's just can only
mm,
appear to exist. And I would
I
almost
agree.
so I wouldn't really say there was a first division or it first experienced pain or pleasure. I would almost go to say that the first division would have been self and other. And essentially, what
Mm,
other is like self and other can both be elastic notions. See, like you can regard yourself as yourself, but what you regard yourself to be can change. Like, for example, you think you're a human, and then let's say, for example, your birthday comes and you think you're this age, and now you think you're that age. Like, what you refer to as
mm,
yourself change, but it's still like yourself. So it's an elastic notion. And also, other can
mm,
be like you could say the other humans or the other animals or the environment. So other can also be ascribed to many different things. Other, in the sense, is the universe or the world, and it's always the self
mm,
experiencing the other. So I would almost go to say that the first split would have essentially been self and other, and the moment that there is
mm,
self and other, the moment that there's two, then there's always bound to be conflict, and that's where pain and pleasure arises. So
mm,
if we're speaking about only about pain and pleasure, I would say that when it was, if we're saying that this happened on a timeline, let's just say, and it was first itself and then it divided itself, um I would say that before it got divided, that would have in a sense been pure bliss or like heaven, or it, essentially kind of non-existence. That's in a sense the most balanced state. That's like the most integrous state, right? So the moment it would have
mm,
split and experienced life, then essentially that's when pain would have been invited in. So I would say that the original
mm,
state is a positive state, or it's not really positive, it's more neutral, but it would have, like, before
mm,
it manifested, it wasn't suffering. It wasn't suffering before it manifested. So it's only when it manifests into form that it begins to suffer.
No, I agree with you. What I don't agree on is that you're saying that you don't believe that reality will exist if there was no suffering. If
Yeah.
there was no duality, we will not actually be able to experience reality. And that's where me and you disagree on.
Yeah.
Uh, and one of the biggest reasons why I disagree on that, because I think you must okay look let's I do understand that consciousness in higher forms is like absolute. But then let's talk about like consciousness in a finite form, right? Like as a
Yeah.
human,
Hmm.
when you first there are things that you weren't conscious of,
Yeah.
and when you were growing up, things that you weren't experiencing when you were growing up,
Hmm.
that you started to experience later on in your life, right? Like let me find a good example of this. um let's talk about you experiencing like your like when you came for the first time.
Hmm.
You have not experienced the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
You've only like so you've only you got to experience that the first time before you even experience the opposite of that.
Hmm.
So what I'm saying is it's possible to have an experience that does not have before you experience the opposite of it, meaning that you can have an experience before you experience the opposite of it, meaning
Okay.
that it's actually possible for reality to exist even if there is no uh, duality, even if there's no black and white, even if there's no pain and pleasure. Like you can experience reality until you experience something and then you experience the opposite of it. But
Yeah.
then there has to be something that you can experience first and then you experience the opposite of it so that you know that okay, there's pain, there's pleasure. Just like a child, like a child that has never touched fire might not know that the pain of like of being burnt, but then after being burnt, then they know the pain, they know how it feels like to be burnt. So that's the thing. I think it's possible to have an experience even if there's no like opposite. Like you can have an experience, you can
Yeah.
like you can be in a state where there's just bliss and there's no opposite.
Hmm. I no, I do agree that you can be in a state where bliss and there's no opposite, but I don't think that it's possible for to experience that in an incarnate form. So if we're saying like you incarnating as any particular being, like a human or an animal or even an alien, whatever exists, anything that takes a form and is experiencing
Mm,
life, time, it's impossible
mm,
to experience life or any kind of experience through time that won't have the oscillations between um, pain and pleasure. Because see, an analogy I like is that almost sine is like life is like a sine wave, right? And we could think of
mm,
the line in the middle is just the base
mm,
or the core, which is just zero, right? And this almost represents
mm,
the absolute truth. And then
mm,
the wave, in a sense, oscillates like up and down above the baseline and below the baseline. And this is kind of what
mm,
creates contrast. This is with loads of different dualities, life and death, and good and bad, and pain and pleasure. It's always oscillating in a sense. And I don't.
mm,
I think so. For example, with your example, like let's say, for example, the first time you're with a woman and you ejaculate and you have an orgasm, right? And you could say there's no
mm,
opposite to that, but I would argue that that is essentially what that is anyone who's experienced that with a woman, right? That is just a peak state of pleasure. You could say that it's a different experience to other experience of pleasure, like having food or something, but I would go to say that that is people would recognize what that is because they have experienced other forms of pleasure. It might not have been as intense, but they've experienced something similar. I remember there was one live I was listening to, or I think it was a live because someone said a comment and they were saying, for example,
mm,
um, it was something about the idea of the prison planet or being trapped, right? And I think someone,
mm,
in for example, that you would have to be free or you would have to be imprisoned to understand what freedom is, right? But then
mm,
you said something like, I think you said something like, what was it that essentially you were saying that like kind of what you're saying now that you don't have to experience the opposite, like you don't have to go to prison, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but essentially what I'm saying
yeah.
that people would understand how limiting or how much suffering that
Oh,
they.
can you repeat what you were saying, because I think you were lagging.
Oh,
Can you try to repeat what you were saying? I think you were lagging.
yes. So essentially, you were saying something along the lines that people wouldn't need to you wouldn't need to experience being in prison or being limited or trapped to understand freedom. That's essentially what you were saying, because they was using on
Mm,
the comment, they said that for example, people in prison or something, it was something along those lines, right? But what I was saying is
mm,
people would understand, even people who've never been to prison, they would understand that being in prison is very limiting and would be a lot of suffering because they've also experienced other forms of limitation, even if they haven't been to prison per se. It's not that you need to go to prison to know what freedom is like, but they also have been imprisoned in other circumstances to some degree. So let's say, for example, they was at school and they was in detention, or they was at home and they
mm,
were out outside or something. They've experienced things which are similar to being in prison. Prison is a way higher degree of that, but they've experienced limitations, so they're able to project and understand the suffering that would occur if they went to prison, even if they hadn't experienced that. So essentially, the reason why I'm speaking about that is because I disagree that you would be able to experience, like, you would be able to be in a state of bliss, but without pain, but you wouldn't be able to do that if you incarnated into a particular form. Like, you could only do that if you remained unmanifest in the absolute truth. Because
mm,
from my viewpoint, it's not possible to create a world, like a world of
mm,
objects. Like, let's say there's an environment, like me, you, the environment. It's impossible to create that without already creating the dualities. Like, that's literally the secondary layer. If we say that the absolute is the most fundamental, then the first thing is the
mm,
split between the dualities, because you already need self and other to have an experience. You already
mm,
need subject and object to have an experience. And the moment you have
mm,
subject, object, and you have that duality, then there necessarily is going to be pain and pleasure. I don't think that it's able to, that you'll be able to incarnate into a form, even if it's not a human, like some other kind of form. I don't think it's possible to incarnate and there not be the possibility of experiencing pain. I think that's just part of, like, pain and pleasure. It is just two sides of the same coin, and it's just, it can't you can't under you could experience one without the other, but you wouldn't be able to understand what it is without having experienced the other. That's what I would say. So what do you think about that?
okay. So there's something that you said that was interesting, actually, because you said in a consciousness in a like an absolute state, it's neutral. I
Yeah,
think you said something like that.
yeah.
So let's say before you have like you experience maybe the worst pain in your life,
Mm-hmm.
or even before you experience pain, because I think some people can grow up without really experiencing like pain, like, I mean, they might maybe experience discomfort, but we're talking about real pain. So
Mm-hmm.
they might grow up and kind of be like in a neutral state, and
Yeah,
then something great happen and they experience like real pleasure. So
yeah.
what I think is that you can experience real pleasure and even appreciate it, even if you haven't experienced the opposite. That is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Even in this realm,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually possible to experience pleasure even if you don't know real pain. Like, you don't have to experience bad things to know what good things are. Like, you know, if you are in a good state, even
Yeah.
if you've never like read, you have nothing to compare it with. But if you are in a good place, because you automatically, like when you were young, you used to appreciate a lot of things that, and you have never experienced the opposite. Like, if you maybe grew up in a first world country and things were good,
Mm-hmm.
and you've never been in a first world, I mean, you've never like been in a third world country,
Mm-hmm.
you might, even if you have nothing to compare your situation with, you can still appreciate that, like, but this is
Yeah.
great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because I think human beings have, like, we've been taught, like, when I was young, my elders used to tell me that, like, when I was complaining about something, I'd be like, there are people who are actually doing worse. So I think we kind of grew up like that, being programmed to think, to kind of like compare our situations with other people's. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm in a good situation. This person is a bad situation. So that means that I'm doing good. So now I have something to compare my situation with.
Yeah.
But really, you can experience. something, you can experience something good without experiencing its opposite first, and not even knowing its opposite until you experience it. I think that's why one of the reasons why uh, some people are very, they seem naive, right? Like they've never experienced the opposite of what they're experiencing. So they're kind of like naive. You
Yeah.
can say that this person might be super, like they're too optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
because they've never really experienced the opposite. So,
Yeah.
so I think it's possible in this realm.
Yeah.
But I get your point, and I think it makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think what's it called? No, I definitely agree. There's people who, like, everyone has a different experience of life, and I think overall you could say that some people will have a way better life than others. Some experience a lot more pain than others, and some experience a lot more pleasure than others. And I do agree that it's possible for some people to experience a lot of pleasure. Let's say they was born into a rich family or something like that, to experience a lot of pleasure, not really see some of the negative sides of reality, and be very naive and be, as you kind of coined, uh, naive positive naive positivity, and kind of
Oh yeah, yeah.
on the world, to where they think everything's perfect, everything's good and nice, but they're in a sense delusional. um but I also think that, as you were saying with comparison, that was a good point there, because I think comparison is not like, you need 2 points to make a comparison, essentially. And
Mm,
like, for humans, we always compare with each other, so that's how the game is played, and that's why it's all a hierarchy, and everyone in a sense is trying to backstab each other to rise above
mm,
the, because to be on top means that you're on top of everyone else, right? So that's why it's kind of,
mm,
that's why there's a lot of haters. I never understood this. I never understood people who would just talk shit in the comments and all of this kind of stuff. But now later on, I started to understand more, because it's some people have nothing good in their life, so it's, in a sense, they can only feel good about themselves by bringing someone else down, because it's all in
mm,
comparison. But at the same time, I feel like, yes, there's some people who experience a much better life and have less experience less pain than others, but also, people for themselves, they usually use their own, I would say that they're measuring against their own baseline. So someone's baseline could be
mm,
above someone else's because their life is way better, but they're also,
mm,
in a sense, experience peaks and valleys in reference to their own baseline. So their
mm,
low may be way higher than someone else's peaks even. So their lows may
mm,
not be that low, but essentially it's just the discrepancy between their own perceived highs and their own perceived lows, and just that difference
mm,
kind of causes the the pain and suffering as well. So even for that, and that's why a lot of these rich kids are become spoiled, and they'll be complaining about
mm,
like small things, because even small things could make them, yeah, like we could say they're just being stupid or something, but it's because they haven't experienced anything really bad. So like even the small things
mm,
could annoy them and make them feel something. So they're gonna also experience some discomfort and pain as well. And I would agree that I would
mm,
argue that pain is discomfort to a very high degree. I would say like discomfort. If we say, imagine it's almost like a scale. In the middle is like neutrality, or just not feeling anything, right? And then
mm,
you could say
mm,
that is a little bit to the right, and then like to the very right is extreme pleasure or bliss or whatever, and then a little bit to the left
mm,
is discomfort, and then far to the left is pain and agony and suffering. So
mm,
essentially, they're always measuring against their own baseline. So even if they don't
mm,
experience as much pain as others, they, like, to themselves, they're gonna feel like they're in pain as well, because they're measuring against their own baseline, essentially. Do you understand what I'm kind of
no,
speaking?
no, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I think.
Um, so it was, let's say a child was born,
Mm-hmm.
and we put something in their eyes, and they never got to close their eyes, right?
Yeah.
They
Mm-hmm.
never got to close their eyes at all.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that child would not be able to like experience light, like to you know what I mean, to, because because I think what you're saying, what you're saying is that reality, remember what you're saying in the beginning, that reality will be impossible
Mm-hmm.
if there was no duality.
Yeah.
So let's say a finite consciousness is born, and as soon as that consciousness is born and become conscious and see, like it's actually able to see the world,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that it would be impossible? That would be actually be impossible if
So
they've never,
we're like kind of keeping its eyes open, right? So it can never close its
you
eyes.
never see darkness, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I hear it. Now that's a really good
Or we can even put it this way,
yeah,
because before a child is born, maybe they never get to see first, so they see darkness,
yeah.
right? But they see darkness, so that means that is possible. So their reality is darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So they can literally, like, if they never get to see at all, they will experience darkness the whole time in
Yeah,
their lives without experiencing light.
yeah.
So I think what you're saying works when it comes to appreciating that. It's much harder for people to appreciate the light if they've never experienced darkness. So, but then it doesn't mean that reality itself would be impossible if one had to experience darkness only, or if one has to experience, they had to see, see the light only. So that's the thing. So I'm saying reality would be possible even if there wasn't like these dualities. And then the reason why I keep on saying that is because I think a lot of people end up justifying, like they use that to justify suffering in the world. That, yeah, well, the reason why they're suffering is because it will be impossible to experience play, it will be impossible to experience pleasure if there was no pain. But I really don't think that is true.
Yeah. No, I so um no, I understand what you're saying, and I wouldn't really use that to justify the suffering. It's just that
Mm,
I on the like I agree that it would be possible. For example, if they only experience darkness or only light, I agree with that, but there wouldn't they wouldn't be able to recognize what, like, for example, if they saw only darkness
mm, mm,
your whole life, you wouldn't be able to recognize that as darkness. You wouldn't be able to
mm, mm,
understand what it is. So you can't, in a sense, you have to experience what a thing isn't. So what I explain them in some of my videos as well is that on the dualistic plane, see, as I said, at the absolute level, everything is itself. But
mm,
as it precipitates into the dualistic plane, everything, it sounds strange, but I can explain it. Everything, in a sense, is defined by what it isn't. So, for example, if
mm,
this remote control, like this PlayStation 5 controller, what it is it's not a PlayStation 4 controller. It's not a remote
mm,
controller. It's not this. It's not that. Essentially, there's 99.9% of the universe which it isn't, which defines what this is essentially.
mm.
And see, how can
No,
I
no,
put?
I'm with you. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
Sorry. I just needed to remember my train of thought. Um,
Mm,
essentially, the and this is essentially happening because if we wanted to say that the absolute truth, I don't like using labels as God or whatever, but if we wanted to say that is God, or the closest thing to God, the absolute truth, right? Essentially, it's
mm,
manifesting or incarnating as us to experience everything that it isn't, so that it can understand what it is. So I,
mm,
I would go so far as to say that the truth, as I said earlier, is always true. Like the absolute truth was always true. And even you said in one video, like, how would God know that it was God, or how would God know that it was itself?
yeah,
And
exactly.
essentially, and that was the dilemma that it was in, because it was all powerful, but it was the only thing that there was. So it wasn't
Mm,
like it always was itself, but it was not able to grasp itself or understand itself, because there wasn't anything other than it to compare against.
mm.
See, like, for example,
Yeah,
if I
that's true.
and then there's other animals, I can see realize, oh, there's animals, like there's humans, there's this, there's that, and you can see everything that you aren't, and then you can see everything that you are, and then you can kind of create a context to understand the content. But
Mm,
so essentially, you need to understand what a thing isn't to understand what it is, and that's where I would say that yes, it's possible for there to, for example, be only pleasure or only pain, but it would not be possible for a conscious being to be experiencing that and recognize it or understand it as for what it was. So they wouldn't, like, if you was just sitting in a vacuum or you was just experiencing only blackness or only darkness, you wouldn't be sitting there thinking, oh, this is darkness, and realize that there even could be such a thing as light. You wouldn't even understand what darkness is unless you experience what light is. So I think it's more about understanding and yes, being able to grasp what a thing is. I don't think that it would be. I think it's possible that we could create that where there was only pleasure or something, but there wouldn't be the possibility of understanding. I feel like that needs to occur in the dualistic plane or within life. Like we need a kind of humans to be able to look back at existence, even though in reality we're just looking back at ourselves, but we're looking essentially back at ourselves from a outside, it's not really outside, but what seems to be an outside point of view to understand it. It's almost similar to, for example, if you speak with friends, and let's say you're in a situation with a girlfriend or you're in a situation with your family or something, you might not be able to see your own limitations or your own blind spots. There might be certain things you might not be able to see, but then if your friend comes and tells you his problems, it's easy to kind of see exactly where he's going wrong or what's like what he needs to do, because it's a lot easier to understand something from a distance. You kind of have to step outside if you get. So that's in a sense what I'm saying is kind of needs to happen to be able to understand what anything is, and that's why I feel like understanding can only happen from within duality, where you can understand what isn't.
No, I think you're right, but I want us to go deeper. I think maybe around 1 hour we're gonna maybe start like responding to some comments, like if people like have questions. But let's discuss a little bit and yeah. Oh, okay. Let's say a child is born. As soon as they are conscious, you make them experience pain. Like there's no pleasure. You literally put them in a state like they can eat, they can they can drink water and whatever, but they're always like you're only feeding them so that they experience pain. So they've never experienced pleasure. The kind of food that they eat, it's not, they don't experience pleasure when they're eating that food. Just eat so that they'll grow. They drink water so that, because when you drink water you don't like really feel good. You just drink. So they experience pain, period, their whole lives. Do you think that it will be impossible for that human as they grow up to realize that they are suffering if they have nothing to compare? Because let's say they never get to interact with any person. We're doing an experiment here. They don't know that there are other people in the world. They think they're the only one that exists, but you are torturing, they are suffering, they find themselves screaming, they can see that they are uncomfortable. Do you think they will be unable to see that they are actually suffering? Like they wouldn't be capable of registering that as suffering, they wouldn't be capable of registering that as the kind of an undesirable.
I think that I think that they would be able to realize that they're suffering, because I don't think I don't want to kind of go against so I can't see your screen. Oh no, yeah, nothing. I don't want to go against the analogy, but I don't think it would be possible to make them experience pain without gaps in between. See, so like for example, let's say you was torturing them, like we could say 24/7, but right, like for them to survive, they would need to consume food, they would need to like maybe have some breaks. Otherwise, if you kept on torturing them 24/7, they would probably just die, right? So same way as you said in some of your videos, that even um just for the fact that there's some pleasures in this life, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a hell realm. So because so my main point is that in those gaps between the suffering, let's say you was electrocuting them, but then within the gaps where you had to feed them to keep them alive, there would be, I'm not saying that it would be experiencing pleasure, but it would experience a contrast from that peak of pain. So I might have to draw like kind of an analogy with a sine wave, but essentially I would say that within that gap where you're no longer torturing them, that would create a contrast. They would experience some relief, even if it wouldn't be pleasure or something enjoyable, but they would experience moments of relief, and they would be able to use that
That would be
as.
neutrality. Would
Sorry.
that be like neutrality?
So I can hear you, but it's I don't know. I can't hear you as well as before. Say something again. I can hear you, but it doesn't sound like it's coming through the microphone anymore. Yeah,
Wait, let me.
It sounded better now. I can. Yeah, say something again. For a moment, it was working there, but yeah, I'm not sure. I can't hear anything at the moment. I can hear you, but it's very faint. It's very faint. It doesn't sound like it's coming through the microphone. Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear if you speak loud. If you speak loudly, I can hear you well enough. But it still sounds faint. Okay, no problem, man. Yeah, just yeah, no rush. Yeah, I can hear you. It was a bit louder before, but I can hear you though. I can hear you. Obviously, I'll ask the chat and see if it's fine for them. It's sounding the same as it was before. I can hear you, but it's faint. Yeah, it's not coming through the your headphone microphones, but I can hear you through the computer. I can hear you through the computer, but it's not as loud as it was before. But
weird. Man. It's actually weird. Because the volume is 100% and the battery on these things is like 70%. So
Maybe try. Are
yeah.
you're connected to your phone, innit? Maybe try like turn the Bluetooth on and off, or like reconnect. It might work.
I just did that. I just
Okay.
did that. I've
But
disconnected.
I can hear you decently now, though. I can hear you decently now. It's not too bad.
Yeah, I'm also able to hear you like better, but I don't know what. I don't know. It's weird, man. It's weird.
Yeah.
But you think we can go on like this?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. If you just speak loudly, it's just about your chat if they can hear us. Um
All right, guys, tell me if you're able to hear me because this is not supposed to be happening. It's the weirdest thing ever. It's not like I've touched my headphones. It just the sound just went down on its own, and yeah. And I tried to disconnect because it's supposed to work when you disconnect the Bluetooth. I'm supposed to hear him through the audio of my cell phone.
yeah.
That's how it's supposed to happen. But we're
hmm
unable to hear each other, which is weird.
Yeah.
But let me try for the last time, and if it doesn't work, then we're gonna go on like this.
Okay, no
Let's
problem,
try.
no problem.
Okay, I've disconnected the Bluetooth. How about now? Are you unable to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you like when you're closer to the camera, but there's also a slight echo where I can hear my own voice. Some people in the chat are funny though. They're saying Agent Smith has entered the chat.
Because I can hear you, but the volume is down, and I'm trying to increase it.
Yeah.
It's so weird, man. It's so weird. Like, let me check something here.
Saying the demiurge is trying to interfere.
This is not supposed to be possible. Anyway, let me just reconnect this.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to just do it like this. There's no other option. It's weird, but let's try.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Just as long as you say the question loud, I can hear everything you're saying.
Yeah, that's good. But don't you think that in this world of duality, there might be something that actually is making people suffer more, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's just say you're right. Let's just say reality might not, like we might not be able to appreciate pain if there was no. I mean, we'll not be able to appreciate pleasure if there was no pain. But don't
Mm-hmm.
you feel like there is something that is kind of like taking advantage of that and making sure that we are being tortured, like we are suffering? Like the example that I was giving you, that
Mm-hmm.
let's say a child is born and we are torturing this child 24/7, and you
Yeah.
think about the breaks. You're like, okay, what if like when the time that we're feeding this child, they are able to kind of like experience comfort, and they
Mm-hmm.
they can compare their comfort to their pain. So
Yeah.
what if there's something that is actually like making us suffer the way that we're suffering? Is that not possible?
Yeah, I think that is possible, and that was essentially kind of what I was trying to explore in that video that I sent to you. The video, I think it was called the Cosmic Food Chain, and essentially that's where I was explaining the holons. For your viewers who don't know what that is, essentially what I was saying was that where usually people think that reality is created out of material, and they say, for example, that things are made out of atoms, or it doesn't essentially matter what they think, if it's atoms or strings or anything, but they usually it's they think that there's very small units that are essentially being built bottom up to construct this reality. And what I was saying is that in that video is that a better substitute is these things called holons, which in a sense that means that everything that reality is made out of is simultaneously a part and a whole. For example, if we say like my human body is one whole human body, right? But it's also a part of the human race. And then like this whole human body is made out of smaller parts. Like for example, my arm, my other arm, my torso, my legs, and then so it's a whole which is made out of smaller parts. And then you could take one of the parts, for example, my arm, that's also made of smaller parts. Like for example, my bicep, my tricep, my forearm, my hand, and then you could take another part, like a section, which is just a part of this whole, and it's its own whole, right? Like this is just its own whole hand, and it's also made of smaller parts. So essentially, and you could zoom in forever, and you could also zoom out. So you could say this human is its own whole, but then I'm a part of the human race. And then you could say the human race is its own whole species, but it's a part of the animal kingdom. And you could say the animal kingdom is its own whole, but it's a part of Earth. And then Earth is its own whole, but it's a part of the solar system. So essentially, everything is simultaneously a part and a whole, right? And you can zoom in and out forever. So this is kind of the fractal nature. And the reason why I explained that at the beginning of the video was because I do think it's possible that there is such a thing as a demiurge or archons or something which is in comparison. I'm not saying in comparison to the absolute truth, or you could say the God self or our God self. So not our absolute self, but when we believe ourselves to be a human, I would agree that it's possible that there's entities that are above that in reference to humans, which could be feeding off our suffering. I think that's possible. But essentially, what I was saying in that video, where I would disagree with most people, where when they suggest that, for example, the demiurge is like God or the ultimate, and God is just causing us to suffer just for its own gain, I would disagree that the demiurge is at the absolute level or is the most fundamental. I wouldn't say that because I would say the absolute is already unconditional and it doesn't have a form which it needs to sustain. So, for example, for humans, we have a particular form, like your form. So you need to eat in order to survive. So we like feed off animals or plants or whatever, and then the animals feed off other animals and so on. And essentially, what I was saying is, it's possible that there's something above us, like usually humans think of themselves at the top of the food chain, but we're just kind of in that mind frame. We're just kind of thinking materialistically, like we see animals, we see all these things, and we're in a sense at the top. But let's say, for example, because we're acknowledging that the universe is infinite and there's from time this exists, like pretty much anything can exist, right? So it's possible that there's potentially spiritual beings or beings that we as humans may not be able to perceive, which do still exist, right? That are feeding off us. But I would go so far as to say that they are not fundamental and that they themselves must also being fed upon. So what I was, and I'm not saying this is absolute truth. This was where I was speculating a bit, but this is where I was bringing in the holons, where I could imagine that there's archons or the demiurge that's feeding upon humans. As we're feeding on animals and animals are feeding on plants or whatever, there could be something above us which is feeding off us. But I would say whatever that thing is not absolute. Like it has to also be incomplete because it needs us to survive. So like if it was complete and absolute, it wouldn't need to be feeding off us, right? So I could imagine that there is something feeding off us, but it's likely that there's something else above that which is also feeding off that, and it could essentially be an infinite causation. Because I don't see why an absolute God, which has no particular form, would need to feed it, right? Like when you have a body, you need to feed your body to sustain itself. But if the absolute doesn't have a body, right, if it's not manifested, then why would it need to be extracting things from us to sustain itself? Like I think that's possible, but whatever that thing is, if we call it the archons or the demiurge, I think that it itself is also limited. So it's kind of similar to what you were saying with the AI. I think that it could be true that there's this AI that is making our life a living hell and making it more difficult than it needs to be. However, it's that AI is not fundamental. It's only secondary, and as you said many times, it relies upon us and it relies upon our energy to, like, unless we give it the authority, right? As you said many times, we have the authority because we're the sovereign being, right? But if we believe in it, then it almost gives it more power, and the more attention we give to it. But if you essentially realize that yes, there can be a demiurge or something which is causing us to suffer more than, let's say, we need to, but at the same time it's not absolute, so it's not something that we can't defeat ourselves. As you've said many times, I feel like there's ways around it where we can conquer it. It's not that we're just, I don't think that it helps for many viewers when they kind of start adopting the victim mind frame, and they always think that that there's something else kind of, in a sense, bullying them, and that there's nothing they can do about it. Because if what we're saying is right and they actually are the absolute truth and they have the authority, then they are going to, similar like that film you said. I watched that recently. That film, what was it? Vanilla Sky. I watched that one, to where he in a sense is creating his own nightmare. So I feel like if we become conscious enough, we can defeat the demiurge, because it's not really absolute. It's not ultimate, if you get what I'm saying. So it's still possible that it exists, but I don't think that the demiurge or these archons are God or the ultimate. I don't think so. I don't think that God is really, it's not really like zoomed in on humans per se. It's very impersonal, but not in a insidious way. It's just that, like, God, I would argue that the absolute truth, or God, doesn't really care about humans more than it cares about ants or pigs or like anything, or rock. Like it doesn't really have any. It's completely indifferent, if you get what I'm saying. The absolute truth, because it doesn't have a particular perspective. But yeah, I was ranting there for a while. So yeah.
That's because I want you to talk more, and one of the reasons why I want you to talk more is because people ain't gonna be able to hear me properly. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's better if you talk more.
Okay. No problem. No problem.
Plus, I love the fact that you are able to talk, like explain things very well. But what
Yeah.
are your thoughts on us being gods? Like us
Okay. Yeah.
really being the absolute, and what happened is that like consciousness itself made partitions of itself, and
Hmm.
yeah, so we were like God experiencing itself from different perspectives. What do you think about that? Like God is
Yeah.
not something
So
that is actually separate from us.
sorry. Say that last bit again.
No, I'm saying God is not something that is actually separate from us. We are it.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
just that
And I think,
we've made. Yeah, yeah. You can go on.
yeah. So I think that this is one of the biggest tricks that essentially, like, religion and all these things have played, is the idea of an external God, right? So that there is a God, an almighty or a creator, but that is somewhere behind the scenes that we can't see, and it's just pulling the strings somewhere back there, and we can never get to it. Essentially, yes, an external God, a God that is someone other than ourselves. And I feel like that is what's happened there is very similar to the analogy that you use with the AI. Is that, see, when I'm saying that the absolute truth is absolute, what that means is that there's nothing other than that. So like me, you, all of your viewers, we're all the absolute truth, right? So there's nothing other than that. There's no one else to be experiencing in itself other than truth or other than God, because only God exists. So it's not like there's God and then something else. It's like there's only God, right? So, but as I was saying before before the split of duality, there wasn't contrast or enough perspective for God to be able to perceive itself or be conscious of itself in a sense. Like, it was conscious, but there was nothing to be conscious of. So as I was explaining before, you can only really understand something by understanding what it isn't. So essentially, even though this dream, if we say this dream or this hell realm that we're in, we realize, and you've said many times, that this reality isn't real and so on. But the reason why it appears to be real is because it's essentially God or you as yourself are constructing this reality. As you said many times, it wanted to experience something where it was out of control, because it's in absolute control, in its absolute sense. It wanted to experience something opposite to that. So that's why it's created this life of where there's you as a human and many other humans and many other animals, because it had to experience everything that appears to be opposite to God. Like if you ask a normal, like any human, you would say, is that dog God? They're going to say no. If you say, is that human God? They're going to say no. So everything that's appearing, we would say isn't God, right? Like no one would look at the wall and say it's God. So everything that we experience seems to be not God, right? So God can only perceive what it isn't, but by going, even though it's not really going through time, in a sense, by going through this experience of experiencing everything that it isn't, it can create enough contrast to understand what it is. So it sounds strange, but I really go to say that the God was always itself. So it's not like God became itself at a particular time, or like God created itself. Like it didn't even create itself. It just always was itself eternally, because there's nothing else that it could be. But even when it was itself, it couldn't it didn't mean that it knew that it was itself, or it knew that it was God. So it had to incarnate as like a human or as an animal or whatever, experience limitation because it's unlimited in its true form. It had to experience limitation so that it, and then like go through all of that, see the downsides of that, which we experience through life. Like we experience all the limitations of life, and through that, as it explains, gains more and more experience, it can start to understand what it is. It can become conscious of itself. So in a sense, like God is awakening itself through us as instruments, in a sense, per se. It's kind of like, it's not like using us because we are God, but it's just that when we identify as a human, it seems like God is external, but actually that externalized God is just ourself as God, but just what we've excluded, like what we deny of ourselves. Do you understand what I'm kind of saying?
No, no, I agree. No, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very true. Um, yes, are you able to read the comments?
Yeah. I can see the comments. Yeah, I can see the comments.
Guys, if you have some questions, you can ask, because yeah, man, like this is not really working. So, but what are your thoughts on solipsism? What are your thoughts on the idea that there's only one mind, and it hasn't really split itself into different perspectives, but it's just one mind. It's just one. There's just one mind, one consciousness.
Yeah. What's it called? Yeah. So in a sense, see, solipsism is a tricky topic, but I would go to say, right. See, I like this analogy. There was one video that I said where, for example, if we think of consciousness like as a boundless field, right? Like a field, like we can think of it as the quantum field, or it's just an empty space. But if you think of space, like space doesn't have an edge, right? There's no like inside or outside. Like space just goes out forever. So in a sense, it's like an infinite field of consciousness. And because there's no edge, like let's say, for example, I draw a circle, right? Like, let's say I draw a circle. So I just look at this thing. If I just draw a circle, and then we could say that's the center, right? But then if I draw like a point over here, then we can't say that that point is the center because it has an edge, right? We can only say that that's the point, the center in reference to the circle, right? But if there's no edge, then you could imagine that any coordinate that you take within the field can be taken to be the center. Do you get what I'm saying? So if there's no edge, right, any point in the field can be taken to be the center. So that's why it feels like for everyone that they're in the middle of the universe, right? So like you could think back 20 years ago and it felt like you was in the middle, in the center. And even now you feel like you're in the center, right? And you could even walk 100 meters that way and you'll still be in the center. Is because there's not really a true center, but because there's no edge, no matter how far you go right or left, you're always going to be in the middle, right? So this is why any kind of perspective, and you could think of different perspectives, like my perspective, your perspective. If we think of the whole field of consciousness, and we think of like the perspective of Nathaniel, the human, and the perspective of Benedictine, you could think like Nathaniel's one point, and then Benedictine's one point, and we're both seeing parts of the absolute, right? Um, and you could say that they're different points, but it doesn't matter which point you're looking from. If you're looking from my point or your point or even your audience's point of view, then it's gonna feel like they're in the center, right? Um, so essentially, no matter which point of view you take, it's always going to feel like it's happening to you, and that the world revolves around you. This is why it feels like the world revolves around everyone, right? Like whoever you ask, it feels like it's happening to them. Even though that there's not really someone here, like there's not really a true center, but it always feels like it's converging to us. So how can I put it? Every single time, if you ask any human, if you have they're having their own experience, it's impossible. Like what you were saying, it is very true that it's impossible to know if anyone other than your own self exists. Like some people can deny that, but it is possible. Like I'm not saying we can get into that later. That gets a bit deeper, but I'm not saying necessarily that no one else exists. But it is impossible to know for sure if anyone else exists, because every person you've ever seen or experienced is within your consciousness, right? Within your mind, as you've explained many times. So you can't escape your own consciousness because your consciousness doesn't have an edge. So everyone you see is like it within your mind, right? Because your mind doesn't even have a bound, really. There's not really an edge to your mind. It seems like it, but there's not really an edge. So you've never experienced anyone outside of your mind. So you can't be certain if anyone exists outside of your mind, or if they're just like an NPC character, like in your dreams, as you've explained many times. So I do definitely agree that it's impossible to know if anyone else exists. Some people, even though they can acknowledge that, then they might still say, but it still helps to act as if people do, because it seems like it and so on. And I agree with that. Like when it comes to practical things, it does help sometimes to act as if other people exist. But yes, there really is no way of verifying. And if I'm speaking from the absolute sense, then I would also go so far as to say that really no one else does exist. But I wouldn't say that it's like only you, like only me as a human, I only exist and no one else exists. I would say no, no one else exists, but even you don't exist. There's only the absolute truth. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm not saying, oh, only you exist. That's where I think some people go wrong with solipsism. They think, yes, in solipsism, but they think, oh, I'm the only human that exists. None of these humans exist, but I exist. And they still think of themselves as a human. See, it is true that you are the only one that exists, but not as a human, only as absolute truth. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the truth or the self, that's the thing that has no opposite. And that's the self that everyone calls themselves as I. When like if I call myself I and you call yourself I, like that's the same absolute self that we're referring to. It's that same center point. So we can't really know if anyone else exists, but and I would go to so far as to say that no one else exists, but neither do you though. This is where the wrinkle where I disagree with many other people. Do you get what I'm kind of saying there?
No, I'm with you. No, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Can you read the comments and try to respond to the comments? And I think some people were asking what the name of your channel is, which we're going to link in the description after this conversation. I want to go out a little bit so you can just read the comments.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. No problem. No problem. That's it. Yeah, so I'm just gonna read through a couple of the comments and reply to a few things. Benedictine just went out for a little break. And yeah, there's also a problem with Benedictine's mic. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, we'll just have to work through it. And the name of my channel, if you guys are interested, is Peaks and Valleys. I don't really know how to write it in as a comment, but one sec, I'll write it down on this piece of paper. Yeah, Eggman put yeah. What Eggman put in, that's my channel. Just Peaks and Valleys. I don't have many subscribers, so you might not find it if you just type that in. But if you type in Peaks and Valleys, no spaces, and you just type in truth or absolute truth, Peaks and Valleys, absolute truth, then you'll find it. Yeah, that's it. Cheers, man. Cheers. Um Yeah, man. The Matrix is trying to interfere with our conversation.
Man, I really think it's weird that the mic is
Bro,
not working.
I had a feeling. Oh shit! I had a feeling that something like that would happen, man. But yeah, I don't know, man. They don't want the truth coming out, man.
Yeah, it's you know how it happened. Like the network disconnected for maybe like 1 to 5 seconds, right? And
Yeah,
then when it reconnected again, you said you were unable to hear me clearly. I was like, what's going on? How is he unable
yeah,
to hear me? Because we're having a conversation. So it could be
yeah,
like maybe YouTube has technical issues. I don't think it has to do with my phone or this, because how? Because we haven't changed anything. So it's
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
But
Nah, but you're sounding better
but
now, though. You're sounding better now. As long as you just speak loud enough, I can hear you. So it's just a bit quiet, but I can hear you though clearly. Clear enough.
no, that's good, man. That's good. Besides, you know what? I think we can turn this into something positive.
Yeah,
I like to talk a lot. I like to talk a lot. So if people can't hear me clearly, it means that
yeah,
I'm gonna talk a lot. So
yeah,
I agree
yeah,
with
yeah,
you
yeah.
too, because you are really killing it. You are really making a lot of sense.
Cheers, man. Cheers.
I'm also learning, because that's the thing. Like
Mhm.
it's about evolution of consciousness. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
learn from other people. As we share energies, we learn from each other.
Mhm, mhm. Definitely, and as I said, like as I've been watching your videos as well, it's been helping me out as well a lot because um I feel like no, I feel like no matter how I feel like no matter how conscious you become, right? I think that there's a certain amount of truth. Like for example, when we're speaking about the absolute truth, I feel like you can either just realize it or not, right? Which is in a sense is kind of like a yes or no. Like either you kind of are aware of it or not. But at the same time, I feel like consciousness is more like a scale, and you can always, no matter how conscious you are, you can. It's almost like you can always become a little bit more conscious, and as we was kind of discussing before, listening to lots of different perspectives, especially well, if you're listening to lots of different perspectives, but they're low quality perspectives. Like if you're just listening to like this pastor and this guy and like then it doesn't really help that much, right? But if you're listening to different perspectives of many different conscious people, then it can help a lot, and that's really what helped me a lot most of my journey, because I didn't really like to just subscribe to just one person and always just only listen to them and just say like, oh, whatever they're saying is the absolute truth, and forget what everyone else is saying. I didn't really like to do that. There were some people that I listened to more, but I like to listen to lots of different conscious people, see where they kind of overlapped, where they contradicted each other, like what made the most sense to me. And then of course I think one thing as well is that people need to, as you said as well many times, is that they need to trust their own experience. Like we've been kind of brainwashed to not trust your own self and always just listen to some other authority. So the same way we was kind of speaking about the external God, it's the same thing with government and all these things, to where it's always about externalizing power. Like these systems always want us to externalize our power to them, um so, and because of this deep conditioning, people don't really trust themselves. And I think that that's one of the main things. Like once you're able to start trusting yourself more and your own perception, then you can start to make like real strides, if you get what I'm saying, whilst also taking other perspectives into account. So you don't want to only be listening to others and never think for yourself, but you also don't want to be isolated to where you hear no other perspectives, and there might be another perspective that could undermine one of your assumptions or something like this, but you're not aware of it because you're just not listening to anyone else.
No, I agree with you, man. I agree with you, because uh, I think if you're only like stuck on like one perspective, there's no way you're gonna evolve. Because you said,
Yeah,
like,
nah,
as we're talking about dualities, we spoke about experiencing the opposite. So once you experience the opposite, you kind of like see what makes more sense. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I like debating with people. I like to hear what they don't agree with, so that
Hmm.
I'll see if they make more sense than me. So that
Yeah.
if they make more sense than me, I will adapt what they're saying.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you're very, very right.
Yeah.
should be doing though to kind of, let's say there was a demiurge, like
Mm-hmm.
something that was like, keeping us in lower states of consciousness to
Mm-hmm.
feed off our energy. What
Yeah.
should we be doing as people to, to evolve enough to be able to conquer this thing? Because we can't be trapped here forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I think that for example, like some of the things that you were saying, I agree with a lot about detaching from this reality, and I think that the way people can do that is it's cliche because they say, for example, the devil's in the details, but I really feel like one of the mechanisms of this dream or of this construction that kind of keeps people so hooked or like in within the matrix, right, is the little details. So when you get like same way, for example, if you're watching a film or you're watching a TV series, the way they get people invested is by the details and the multiple layers of the story. So it's always multi-layered, there's always different details. And then when you start paying attention to the details, it kind of brings you in and you start investing your energy, right? So as you've said many times, I think that attention is one of the most important things. So where we essentially put our attention, in a sense, is where our energy is being directed. So I would almost think of energy isn't anything in particular, right? It's I would say it's the sum of zero. There's one video that I made about this called money, energy, and the zero sum game. So I would almost say that energy almost represents zero. It's almost like currency, but it always oscillates right and left. So it goes into credit, into debt, into credit, into debt, right? Um, and essentially, so energy, it always has a direction. So same way with a dream, if you're thinking about it, all of your dreams that you've had or even your life, there's always a direction that is going. Like the dream is always progressing somewhere, or you're always trying to go somewhere that's not here, right? um and essentially, so energy always moving, and essentially you can kind of control your own energy through your attention. So this is what a lot of the elites are doing with all these advertisements and everything, is essentially they're kind of trapping your attention and making you focus on the wrong things, and making you focus on these kind of details. And the more you're zoomed in, the more you're essentially being like missing the big picture. It's like they're kind of getting you too hooked into the little frame, and then you're missing the whole picture, right? And then that's where they can kind of manipulate you a lot better. So it's a lot about taking more control of your own attention. So um, you have to kind of realize which things that you're applying your attention to, which are detrimental to you. Like it could be a toxic relationship, or you're doing this or that, or ways that you're kind of leaking your energy that you have to kind of cut out like completely, or try to slowly distance yourself from them, and more focusing on yourself. It sounds selfish and it sounds narcissistic, but um, I feel like people really should embrace silence and solitude. It was one video of yours that I really agreed with as well. And I think that a lot of the highly conscious people that I listen to as well, they always tend to be people who are by themselves. They have a lot of time to sit and reflect, because you can't really be reflecting. Like consciousness, in a sense, is like a mirror. It's like you're reflecting, right? And you can't really do these things to a deep level if you don't have time to yourself. So like when the matrix is always in a sense like saying I'll go out party and doing this thing, chase this Ferrari, chase that thing, get the house, it's always in a sense it's kind of using distraction. You're always kind of leaking your energy by going this way and that way and dispersing your energy. And it's more about kind of focusing back on yourself and taking your power back. And you can't really do that and think for yourself if you don't have enough time and distance. So yeah, that's kind of what I think. And as I said, attention I think is really, really important.
No, I like that, man. I like the message of hope. It seems like you can hear me and people can't hear me. Like it
Yeah,
looks like we
I
have a
don't know. Like I can hear
technical
you, but
difficulty.
I don't know. Like they must be able to hear you at least, because I can hear you. So I'm not sure, but I hear what I hear
Guys,
what they're
tell
saying in the comments
if
though.
you can hear me a little bit. Tell me, like guys, tell me in the comment, like in the
Yeah,
comment
tell
section.
like
Because it
if
seems
you
like
can
you
hear
can't hear me at
Benedictine,
all.
then put a one in the comments. If you can't hear him, then put two, and we'll see.
Because it's it's weird. It's weird. Man. This is not supposed
Yeah.
to happen. But
you know what we're gonna do? We'll still do this again.
Yeah,
It's gonna
definitely.
be more about you. Today is
Hmm.
gonna be more about you. They say it's
Yeah.
quiet. It's weird.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
next
No,
time you're gonna
it's
have to be
it's
the
a
one
shame though,
who.
man, because I was looking forward to this one. And no, it's still good what we've done so far. But yeah, no, it's just it's annoying. So
Now this time today is just about you, Ben. Like I like to turn a negative into a positive.
yeah.
So if if negative things are happening, then let's
Hmm.
turn it into a positive. So
Yeah. Of course,
that's
yeah,
fine. You are
yeah.
really, if you are helping me, like the things that you're saying are also
Hmm.
helping me. I can
Hmm.
imagine, how it's also helping you.
Yeah.
So I
No,
like this
cheers, man.
message of hope that
Hmm.
we can beat this thing.
Yeah.
It's not like it's over for humanity, you
No,
know,
yeah.
because
No,
some
and
of
I
us.
think as well there was one video where you were speaking about if if you want to see fear in the eyes of a conscious person, then you'll speak to them about reincarnation. And like I agree with you as well, man,
Yeah.
because like reincarnation, like I don't know, like I definitely have enjoyed my life to some degree, and even that video where you were saying if you would want to relive your life, and I wouldn't really want to relive my life. But I also did write a comment there that I think that it would make a difference if the person had the memories of their life. So if they still remembered everything they went through and went back, then I think that would be a different experience to if they went back without their memories. Because I feel like it would unfold if they didn't have the memories, I feel like it would unfold very similarly, if not exactly the same, because it's almost like a domino effect, as we said many times, and the law of causality. Um, so yeah, like but same way, I don't really want to. I wouldn't want to reincarnate either, and I think that that is some of the most important work that you're speaking about and that I'm speaking about as well is kind of coming to a level of consciousness where see what it is it depends on your ground, right? The way our psychological structure is, it's like your mind always wants to have a ground to stand on. Like it is it and this isn't necessarily only physical, this can be conceptual as well on the mental level. Like for example, if there's a human and then they think that they're standing on earth, like they think that they are on earth, like in the solar system or something like that, and that they're at this particular time 2024. So all of these things are like a ground, like it's like context for them to explain how this moment like happened, right? um it's just that, how can I put it, reality, like there's no true ground within the relativistic plane. So as I was explaining before, in the relativistic or dualistic plane, it's always oscillating. So it's always impermanent. Like it's always changing. Like each day is different to the last, right? So there's not anything that you can really like put your foot on and stand on solidly, because whatever conditions that is may change tomorrow, or it can always be it's all conditional, right? So people are more identified with their physical body and the all the backstories, as you said, all these backstories that kind of explain how they got here. But to really, the way I see it, to really detach yourself from this reality, you have to realize that are not you're not based within the dream. See, like you're in a sense that you're like a dream character. It's like you said, like it's like what you can trap what you believe yourself to be, but you can't trap the real consciousness or the real truth. Like the consciousness can't be trapped. It's only what it identifies with or what it appears to be. So a lot of the work is disidentifying with everything that you've been programmed to believe. So, for example, your name, like what you look like, all these things, like especially your name and these labels, because there's certain things that are called anchors, right? Which is psychological. It's like these things that, because as I said, in the dualistic plane, everything is in flux, is impermanent. So what we have psychologically is these things that are called constants. Like for example, your name, or let's say you live in a particular country. Like I'm from the UK and I'm this age and so on and so forth, and I look like this. I'm from here. So all of these things are like constants, even though everything is changing. Like yesterday, today is different from yesterday, and tomorrow will be different from today. But there's certain things that seem to remain the same, like your name or something that you've always had. And these are the things that people identify with the most and that we need to detach from. Because as long as you're kind of still attached to those, then it's like you're investing in the dream character, like what you believe yourself to be, which you actually aren't. It's just like that's what you're appearing as, you see.
No, that's brilliant, man. That's brilliant. I
Yeah.
agree with everything you said, 100%. What are your thoughts on free will?
Okay, yeah, free will. Now this one's a good topic, right? So I think there's two sides of this. Many like philosophers and these people, they speak about like free will and determinism, right? And I think that many people. All right, so it's going to be difficult. This is complex because there's kind of like two layers to my answer, right? I would say at the absolute level, there is no free will. But at the same time, at the absolute level, no one exists or nothing exists. So there's not really any events or any people, like individual people, who could be making a decision, right? There's not any, like, because to make a decision, there has to be already two parts, like right or left. To choose, make a choice, there has to be like the choice to go right or left or up or down. If there's not even right or left, then how can you choose something, right? So at the absolute level, there's not even choice because there's nothing to choose from. But in the relative plane, I would go to say that it's neither that we have free will, nor is it deterministic, right? So I think that some people they go too far on the free will because they think that everything they do, like for example, if I pick up this pen, they would say, like, for example, I just chose to pick up this pen, like just out of nowhere, I just chose to pick up this pen. Um, as if there wasn't like an infinite causation back. See, because for example, if I pick up this pen, the reason why I'm picking it up is because we're doing a live stream. And then the reason why we're doing a live stream, because I messaged you before and I saw your videos and I sent you this. See, we could keep on going back, and you could even go back to like the moment of birth. Like you could keep on going back in past and see the chain of causality, right? So there's not really one thing in particular that caused this. It's like a domino effect. But at the same time, so when someone says, "Oh, they just picked up this pen," it's almost like they're treating this moment as its own. Like it's almost like they put this moment in a box, like it's in a vacuum. Like this moment is completely like separate from the past. Do you get what I'm saying? Which I don't think is the case. But at the same time, I wouldn't go to say that everything is predetermined on the relativistic plane. Like I would say that we have free will, but it's like a capacity. It's a limited capacity. As a human, if we're speaking about on the human level, I'd say we have free will, but it's a capacity, and it's not even fixed. Like it goes up sometimes, down sometimes, and there's other forces which are also in the equation. So we could say, for example, like if I'm going to the gym and I'm trying to lift like 100 kilos, right? And then let's say first I lift 80 kilograms and I'm trying to lift it and I can do it. Like I'm strong enough, I'm trying to do it and I can do it, right? And then let's say I try to do 100 kilograms. And then because there's my will, like what I want as a human, and then there's the weights, there's gravity, all of these different forces at play, right? And then let's say 100 kilograms, I could do it, but only if I'm trying really hard. Like I have to exert really hard, like a lot of free will. But then let's say I still have the muscles. I'm capable of doing 100, just about. But like I was able to do it if I tried. If I didn't really try, maybe I wouldn't have been able to do it. But if I tried really hard, I'll be able to. But then let's say 200 kilograms. It doesn't matter how hard I'm trying. If I don't have like the muscles and the strength, then it doesn't matter like about my free will because the weight, the force of the weight is like the like in comparison to my will in the equation, it eclipses it now. Do you see what I'm saying? To where the weight was so high that it didn't matter how much I was trying, I wasn't able to lift it. See, so I feel like there's multiple different forces at play in the equation, and sometimes your free will is enough to overcome the environment, and sometimes the environment is like the force is superior or it has more influence on the external world than you, and it feels like you're more at the effect of it. So do you understand what I'm kind of saying? I feel like we have a choice, but it's limited, and much of the things, like for example, even if I'm choosing right or left, the choices that were given to me that I can kind of choose from, I didn't choose the choices that I got to choose. I like the choices was already predetermined by the environment. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of mixed. It's like the environment that determines the situation, and I kind of just react. So you can kind of react, but a lot of it is predetermined, if you get what I'm saying. So I feel like we have free will, but it's not absolute. Like, it's not like absolute free will, and it's not absolutely determined. That's already like on the relative plane. So what do you think of that?
No, I don't want to talk a lot because people
Oh
can
yeah,
really
I'm
hear
sorry,
me
I'm sorry, I'm
clearly.
sorry. Yeah,
But trust me, man, trust me. Like you have explained it very well. You have explained it the way that I would have explained it. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Like you, that's the thing, like I agree with you 1,000%.
Mhm.
I can't say we like I believe in causality. I believe that everything is a
Yeah.
result of like
Mhm.
causality, it's cause and effect. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the way that I look at it. Um, but I do think that if there's something that I would like us to talk about a little is like at an absolute level, right?
Mhm.
You're saying that we don't have free will at an absolute level. You're saying that
Yeah.
it's kind of like things like explain that a little. I wanna
Yeah. So
have
so
your
the reason why I said that is because, see, at the absolute level, there's not anything opposite, right, to it. So there's not really, as I was explaining, see, choices like free will in a sense is like a capacity to exercise choice, right? Like if we're saying we have free will, like I have free will to go outside or to stay inside, or I have free will to like turn on my TV or not turn on my TV. See, these are choices, right? But for me to make the choice between turning on my TV or not turning on the TV, the environment has to already be in a certain way to where, like, for example, my TV is there, I have my remote, so it's the two pathways of choice that I could go down is like has to be there essentially. There has to be the option to go right or left. But as I was explaining before, at the absolute level, there's not the dualities. There's not like any contrast. So there's not anything to choose between. And again, at the absolute level, there's no one but the self. So you could almost say, right, that at the absolute level you have no free will, but also it sounds contradictory, but in a flip sense, it's almost the same as saying you have absolute will. Like at the absolute level, it's like kind of like from the God level, you have absolute will to where
That's what
whatever
I
you,
wanted to say.
yeah, to where whatever you want occurs because there's no other opposite force that can go against that. If you understand what I'm saying, so essentially what we're all experiencing is God's will because whatever God wants happens. It has absolute, it's like omnipotent, and there's no opposing force against it. So it, as soon as it wants something, it happens. But it's almost the same as like saying that it has absolute power and no power. I maybe some of your audience may disagree or you may disagree, but it's almost like saying the same thing because how can I'd like to explain this. For example, if I can choose between right or left, that's free will, but that's still limited, right? Because how can I put it? I'm limited by the options that I have in front of me, right? If I can only choose right or left, then there's not a third option. Like I'm limited by the environment. Do you get what I'm saying? But like the absolute doesn't the absolute is the environment. So it's just that there's no opposite. There's no opposite to it to limit it into. It's very difficult for me to explain, but essentially it has absolute will, but it has no
You're
will
making
because
sense.
it has nothing to choose from. It has the potential to do anything, right? It has the potential to do anything. Like it could shapeshift into this universe, or it could shapeshift into this or that, but at the same time, it it doesn't really have a particular choice because like how can I explain? Like every choice is the choice that it made. Like I can't really explain it because there's no other choice that it could do. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, no,
It's kind of like
no, I'm
it's
not.
kind of like inevitable.
No, I get what you're saying. What I disagree with is that at an absolute level we don't have free will. Let me explain why.
Yeah.
Just that people can't really hear me, but I'm gonna try to
Yeah.
explain why. Let's say consciousness is fundamental.
Mhm.
Everything started with consciousness, and consciousness willed everything into existence, which is
Yeah.
free will.
Mhm.
And then it got lost in the dream.
Yes.
It got lost in the dream. That's where
Mhm.
it doesn't have control. It's kind of like it fell
Yeah.
into a state of insanity because
Mhm.
it forgot that it's God, and that's why we can say, well, there's no free will in this realm, or maybe
Yeah.
there's some level of free will, but we forgot what we are. So everything has been. It started when we forgot what we are. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
causality.
Yes.
That's cause and effect. So I'm saying at an absolute level, because even if you don't remember that you're God,
Yeah.
you still have the absolute power, right?
Yeah.
You have nothing that you're fighting against. So
Mhm.
you, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to say there's God doesn't have free will, right? Like at an
Yeah.
absolute like level, we
Mhm.
have zero free will.
Yes.
That doesn't make sense. It's only when we are in a fallen state of consciousness that's where like we don't
Yes.
really
Yes.
have
I no.
freedom of
I
choice.
understand why it would seem like it doesn't have free will, and in a sense, yeah, in a sense, it makes more sense to say that it has absolute will. In a sense, it makes more sense to say that it has absolute will, but I want to try and it might take a moment, but I want to kind of think of an analogy or way to kind of explain how it's kind of the same thing. See, because like right, any choice that we make, like let's say as a human, you choose to pick up this pen, right? There was there was a lot of the past causation which kind of led to this moment, and it gives me certain inclinations. So it may not be certain whether I pick up the pen or not, but like there will be more inclinations. Like let's say someone is like has been traumatized when they were young, they may be more inclined to commit crime. Not necessarily that they will, but they may be more inclined. And then someone who grew up in a good family, had support and so on, then they may be less inclined to do crime. It's not certain that they won't, but they may be less inclined. So see, like we are also at the effect of like the external environment, right? But see, yeah, you kind of have to think for God, right? If it's like in a vacuum, almost like in a vacuum, right, where there's nothing other than it, and you have to remember that it's not in linear time. So
You froze. You froze. You froze. I don't know what's going on. And okay, wait. Let me try something. Guys, if you can hear me, tell me, cause I think all right. Are you guys able to hear me? Like if you if you're able to hear me, tell me, cause I oh we can hear you now. Oh right, that's it's weird, cause I'm telling you, it's not it's not possible that you guys was supposed to not hear me. Like in the beginning, you were able to hear me properly, but something happened. The network disconnected, and you were unable to hear me anymore. It's actually weird. It's actually weird, but I think we had a very like good conversation. Like it was a very good conversation. I think it would be good actually to like listen to the whole conversation from the beginning, because like this was a very good conversation. Let me try to clip my mic, and I want to go through the comments. Yeah, I'm sorry about what happened. I don't know why why you were unable to hear me, but yeah, it's weird. It's weird, guys.
But now I'm just gonna read the comments. I wish it was possible for him to join again, but I'm going to invite him again another day, and we're gonna see, how we're gonna make it work next time, because I think we had a very, very good conversation. I'm gonna post a link to his channel so that yeah, people will be able to subscribe to his channel. I think, yeah, man, we need truth at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, this channel is about figuring out what is going on. That's the thing. It's not about being negative. It's not about being positive. It's about focusing on what is actually true. What makes sense when we look at reality? What makes the most sense? I think people have been lying to themselves so much that um when they hear something that actually makes sense, they respond negatively. But on this channel, the focus is the absolute truth, man. Like, what is really, really going on? You know, there was a glitch in the matrix. No, definitely, it's weird. I don't like to be like superstitious, but it ought to be like things like this shouldn't be happening. Like, they wouldn't just happen on their own. They won't let you talk. He's the philosophical Jason vision of Jason Tatum. Who's Jason Tatum? But yeah, but nah, we're gonna do this again. We'll definitely do this again. Night Wolf, I'm late. What was today's topic? Um, we spoke about like lots of different topics, so I can't say there's like a specific topic. Like, there were lots of topics. Oh, I think you tried to join, and I like try to join again, because I think you tried to join and I accidentally like rejected. Like, try to join again. Renegade Benedictine, listen to the audiobook of David Icke, The Reveal. No, I'll check it out. I'll check it out. Pix and Valley, try to join again, because I think like I accidentally rejected the live while I was trying to like scroll. So you can try to join again. No, I've not listened to the audiobook of David Icke, but is it here on YouTube? Because I think last time I checked, like David Icke was banned from YouTube. So is if it's here on YouTube, tell me. Night Wolf, no, I am with you. Don't only focus on the negative. Is my point. I'm starting to understand your viewpoint. Yeah, that's true, man. We must try to view things from every perspective. I think that's the only way to go. You must view things from every perspective so that you figure out what makes the most sense. Pix and Valley, my phone died. I'm sorry about that, guys. Now it's good, man. We will do this again. We'll definitely do this again. Renegade, it is fantastic on the topics discussed today. Yeah, true, true. Potato field forever. Why do you think we experience suffering? Um, I think we experience suffering because something wrong happened. I don't think we experience suffering because we are supposed to. Like when I say suffering, I'm not even talking about uh you sometimes experiencing discomfort. I'm talking about real suffering, because when we look at what people are going through, there's some people who are really going through hell in this realm. I don't think that is supposed to happen. Like, that is a good thing. You know what I mean? I don't think that's what consciousness wants to experience. I think something fucked up has happened, and that is why we experience suffering. Peaks and valleys. Cheers, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. 100%, guys. Search. In fact, it might not be easy for you to find it. Like, after this live, I'm gonna end the live soon. So you should check the description. I'm gonna post his channel, like Peaks and Values. You're gonna find it. Very, very great channel. So yeah, check it out. Yeah, guys, thank you all for joining the live. Like the live. We're gonna do this again. We'll definitely do this again. I'll be using my laptop next time so that we don't have problems. But yo, thank you all guys for being part of this.